Hi, everyone. My name is John Dichtl. I'm the president and CEO of the American Association for State and Local History. And I'm excited to be talking to you today about the 250th anniversary of our country and what that means for Museums Advocacy Day. And I'll be making 6 major points that the 250th is a huge opportunity for the field, that most museums are small, that those small museums are everywhere and that they're essential to this 250th effort. Fourth, that history museums and history can help people think critically. Fifth, that history helps society make progress toward justice. And finally, that when talking with legislators, it's really going to help to be very concrete and specific and use local examples. But first, I want to give you an update on 250th planning nationally and what that means. Many of you know that the US Semiquincentennial Commission, appointed by Congress a couple of years ago, has an administrative arm called the America 250 Foundation, which I'll refer to as America 250. And that administrative arm is basically staff for the commission. And last year, America 250 had an injection of $8 million from Congress and was able to reboot itself and expand its staff and planning several times over. And America 250 has 4 pillars: to invite, involve, imagine, and inspire. And I'd like to point out that the first 2 of those specifically state a priority on inclusiveness, to invite all Americans to commemorate and to involve as many Americans as possible from every background and community. So inclusiveness is key here, and it's nothing to shy away from when you're talking to legislators. America 250 now has 12 advisory councils, including one on history education and a new one launched on January 5th for civics and civics engagement. It has opened partnerships with a growing number of entities, from the National Football League to Major League Baseball to 12 different federal agencies, from NEH to the Smithsonian to the Department of Justice, the Department of the Interior, Department of State, and others. In addition, America 250 has established partnerships with tribal nations and has started to create partnerships with a handful of states and other organizations. AASLH, my organization, has become an official partner of America 250 last fall. And also America 250 has begun its own programming, such as last year they did a Veterans Day salute held at the National World War I Memorial in Kansas City, and they have begun hosting community conversation webinars, including one they did most recently on Beyond the 50 States, and took a look at what the 250th is, what it might look like and what it might mean to people in US territories from the Virgin Islands to Guam. Also, looking nationally, about 20 states, maybe 21, have already established their own state commissions, and Indiana, New Hampshire, and California, this legislative session, so very recently, have introduced bills to create commissions in those states. The primary way for your organization to be involved is most likely through your state's commission. Your organization can also be involved, obviously, by getting funding or participating in a program of one of those federal agencies that has either been recognized as a partner of America 250 or already has its own 250th funding and planning going on. With IMLS, NEH, Smithsonian, National Archives, and Library of Congress probably being, and the National Park Service probably being the biggest players there that would be of interest to museums. So America 250's vision for the semi-quincentennial is still that it be decentralized and grassroots. So its role is to help set the major tone and encourage some national projects and to bolster the work of state commissions. National funding will mainly come through the several federal agencies that I mentioned, such as the Park Service, NEH, Library of Congress, and Smithsonian. For example, there's an NEH special initiative already. It's been around for a couple of years, A More Perfect Union. And that's designed to demonstrate and enhance the critical role the humanities play in our nation while also supporting projects that will help Americans commemorate the 250th. And NEH has lined up special funding for projects that fit this 250th initiative. In fact, AASLH, my organization, received grant funding through A More Perfect Union for creating historical themes for the 250th. And we did that in a publication called Making History at 250, a field guide for the semiquincentennial. And that document is available for free as a PDF on our website. And inside are those 6 historical themes for the commemoration. So as we head into Museum Advocacy Day, we should remember how important it's going to be to ask for strong funding for all these agencies and consistent funding as they start to expand their programs and grants to support all of us in expanding our programs for the great expansion of the 250th. On a side note, it's worth recalling how important the approach of the 1976 bicentennial was in the solidification of the NEH. So the NEH was created in 1965, but it really wasn't until 1970-71, when the framework for the State Humanities Councils was created, that NEH became the NEH that we know today, with that reach into all the states, providing such vital funding. So it's that kind of big picture thinking that we should be encouraging in senators and representatives. What major legacy do they want to sponsor for the 250th? What lasting impact can federal government agencies have on museums and related organizations that will serve the American public for generations? And with that question in mind, I'll return to my other major points. So first, the 250th is a huge priority. And as we prepare for Museums Advocacy Day, keep in mind that the 250th presents both the museum field and the nation with a once-in-a-generation opportunity to renew Americans' engagement with history and culture. And the 250th can be a renaissance for history museums. I really believe that. It's a chance for museums and Americans to learn about and reflect upon the full sweep of our nation's past, celebrating examples of liberty, courage, and sacrifice, while reckoning with moments of injustice, racism, and violence. It's an occasion to use history to help us better understand the present and to reinvigorate our commitment to our revolutionary experiment in representative democracy. And no institutions are better positioned than museums to advance this message. So the second point, most museums are small. And while the word museum might call to mind the Smithsonian or the Met or the Getty, advocates should keep in mind and emphasize with legislators and their staff that the most numerous museum in America is a local history organization with a budget under $250,000 a year. And probably most of those, we know most of those, more than half of those have budgets under $50,000. New research from AASLH reveals that there are more than 21,000 history museums and related organizations in the United States, nearly 4 times as many as all other museum types combined. History museums and related organizations are in every state, every congressional district, and most towns in the country, serving populations no other educational cultural institutions can reach. And I'll repeat that because it's important for members of Congress to know this. History museums and related organizations are in every state, every congressional district, and most towns in the country, serving populations that few other educational or cultural institutions can reach. Most of these institutions, however, are small, and the vast majority have shoestring budgets and may operate only through the contributions of dedicated and knowledgeable volunteers. Whether in a small town where the local historical society offers one of the few places for community convening, or in a big city neighborhood whose history is preserved only through the tireless work of its resident volunteers, small history organizations serve crucial needs in nearly every community around the country. These institutions stand at the front line of historic preservation, interpretation, and community memory and identity. They provide millions of Americans a venue for engaging with our nation's history and a crucial space for well-informed conversations about contemporary issues. And support from sources like NEH, state communities councils, and IMLS can be critically important to helping these institutions carry out their missions and to adequately preserve and share our history in the lead up to 2026. My third point, small museums are essential to the 250th commemoration. The US Semiquincentennial Commission and America 250 are planning this anniversary as a decentralized grassroots commemoration, making the participation and contributions of these small history organizations of central importance to the national effort. If we're going to live up to the opportunity presented by the semiquincentennial to advance a more widely shared, more honest and inclusive vision of the nation's history, a history in which Americans of all backgrounds and ages see themselves reflected, these institutions need our support. When you speak with members of Congress this year, emphasize that the time for planning and funding for the 250th is right now. With stronger resources through 2026, federal agencies from the Smithsonian to NEH and NEA and IMLS and the Library of Congress will have resources to support all of our museums and their semi-quincentennial expansion of activities. With greater support, institutions can help more people learn from our nation's past, converse with fellow community members about shared history, and use history to make a better future. My fourth point, think about reframing history. Actually, the fourth point is the fourth and fifth point. I recognize that history has become a partisan lightning rod in recent years, making the words we choose and the framing we use when discussing history of greater importance than ever. New research from AASLH's Reframing History Project offers tested, proven ways to discuss the value of history and history institutions effectively with people of any political persuasion. We'll be releasing our report and toolkit on February 20th and then do a high-profile live-streamed event at the National Museum of American History on February 26th that you'll be able to watch. And we'll dig into it then. But I want to give you a peek at a couple of the report's major findings right now because they're pertinent here. When discussing why history museums matter, you should emphasize that history museums are the source Americans trust most for information about the past, and that learning about history museums helps people develop critical thinking skills, such as the ability to analyze and evaluate evidence and diverse accounts about the past. This ability to assess different sources of information and competing interpretations can be used in many other parts of our lives. And next, history also helps us make progress toward justice in society. Learning about the past to understand what went right, what went wrong, and how we can do better in the future helps us continue the process of becoming a more perfect union and a more just society. In our testing of these findings, we learned that Americans on the left and right can agree on the idea of working toward a just society. And they see that learning about history can lead in that direction. While there's division right now in many states about the teaching of history, including laws or policies at the local level, in about a dozen states to ban the teaching of the history of racism, there is some hope. The American Historical Association of Fairleigh Dickinson University conducted a survey last year to assess public perceptions of and engagement with history. One finding was that the majority of Democrats and Republicans support the idea that schools should teach discomforting issues or painful history. And I think that is very likely to match or map onto museums as well, that this kind of learning should happen in schools and museums. 78% of Democrats and 74% of Republicans agreed with this idea that teaching uncomfortable history is important. Indeed, our own reframing history research found that interview participants from all backgrounds were more likely to recognize that past injustices need to be talked about and remembered in order to make sense of current problems in society. And finally, Our research demonstrates how valuable specific local examples are in these conversations. While general comments about inclusive history might miss the mark with certain audiences, concrete examples of how a local institution is sharing local history with everyone and for everyone in your community are powerful and less likely to spark fear about political agendas. Specific, solutions-focused examples help people imagine what a shared, inclusive history of the US looks like in practice. And they create a sense that this approach to history is truly possible. And that's really exciting. Grounding examples in specific places and cases, that is, someone's own community or neighborhood, makes it harder for that person to deny the value of confronting historical injustices because they are confronted with a particular case from the past and would have to deny the value of learning about that case and the perspectives of that particular group in their state or local community. The semiquincentennial is the rarest of opportunities to get Americans to re-engage with history in ways that are authentic, rigorous, and useful. And to make the most of that opportunity, history museums need help, particularly funding. When we advocate for museums and for NEH and IMLS support, we're asking for an investment to help communities prepare for this once-in-a-generation opportunity. In sum, the semiquincentennial will transform and strengthen the history community, help us create stronger programs, serve new museum audiences, and attract new sources of public and private funding. But we have to ask for that funding and support, and we have to start asking now. The 250th can help put history and history organizations at the center of important conversations in their communities, allowing meaningful dialogue, informed debate, and mutual understanding to replace rancorous partisan conflict. We need more of that kind of learning and dialogue, and that's the function of museums. I hope you'll use some of your time with congressional members and their staff to focus on the 250th and make the point that museums and history organizations are invaluable. Thank you and good luck.